Ladies and gentlemen, there is only one reason someone truly comes back after hurting you. It is not because they suddenly became lonely. It is not because they miss your messages. It is not because they saw you looking happy. It is not because they became jealous. And it is certainly not because you chased them until they finally gave in. People come back when something inside them changes enough to make them finally understand what their absence cost them. Because while you were there, they could avoid the truth. They could ignore your value. They could become comfortable with your forgiveness. They could assume you would always answer. They could believe that no matter how badly they treated you, somehow you would remain available. But when you truly let go, something happens that no argument could accomplish. They are left alone with themselves, and that is where the real confrontation begins. Because sometimes the person who hurt you does not understand what they have done while you are standing in front of them. They understand it when you are no longer there. They understand it when the phone becomes quiet. They understand it when nobody checks on them. They understand it when the familiar presence disappears from ordinary moments. They understand it when they realize that the person they thought they could always return to has finally returned to herself. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the part that most people misunderstand. Someone coming back is not necessarily proof that they have changed. Someone missing you is not proof that they are ready to love you. Someone regretting what they did is not proof that they have developed the emotional maturity necessary to stop doing it. A person can miss your presence and still be incapable of respecting it. A person can regret losing you and still repeat the same behavior. A person can come back because they feel the pain of your absence without understanding the pain they caused when you were present. Therefore, the deepest question is not, will they come back? The deeper question is, who will they be if they do? And even deeper than that, who will I be if they do? Because perhaps the greatest transformation does not occur when the person who hurt you returns. Perhaps it occurs when you reach the point where their return no longer determines your peace. That is where your power begins. There are moments in life when a human being must stop looking outward and begin looking inward. You must stop asking what another person is thinking. You must stop decoding their silence. You must stop analyzing their social media. You must stop wondering whether they regret leaving. You must stop asking your friends what their behavior means. You must stop creating imaginary conversations in your mind. Because every time you obsess over what someone else is thinking, you surrender a little more of your attention. And attention is energy. Where your attention goes, your emotional life follows. If your attention is constantly focused on someone who hurt you, then even after they leave, they are still living inside your psychological world. They may be physically gone, but psychologically, they remain present. You wake up thinking about them. You eat thinking about them. You work thinking about them. You sleep thinking about them. You imagine what they are doing. You wonder whether they miss you. You wonder whether they have met someone else. You wonder whether they will contact you. You wonder whether they are looking at your profile. And you believe you have moved on because you are no longer physically with them. But psychologically, you are still waiting at the door. This is why letting go is so important. Letting go does not mean that you stop caring overnight. It means you stop making another person's behavior the center of your identity. It means you take your attention back. It means you reclaim your mind. It means you begin asking yourself questions that are far more important than whether they will return. What did this experience teach me? Why did I accept what I accepted? Why did I ignore the signs? Why did I believe that love required suffering? Why did I make their approval so important? Why was I afraid to walk away? What part of myself did I abandon while trying to keep this person? These questions lead you somewhere. They lead you inward. And the journey inward is where transformation begins. The human psyche has a strange tendency. We often project our deepest hopes onto other people. We see someone and imagine who they could become. We see potential and mistake it for reality. We see moments of kindness and use them to explain months of inconsistency. We remember the beautiful moments and use them to justify the painful ones. We hold on to the version of someone that existed in our imagination, even after their behavior has repeatedly shown us another reality. This is why heartbreak can be so confusing. You are not only losing a person, you are losing a possibility, you are losing a future you imagined, you are losing a story you told yourself, you are losing the person you thought they would become. And sometimes the hardest thing to accept is not that they hurt you. It is that the person you hoped they would become may never exist. That realization can break something inside you. But sometimes what breaks is the illusion. And when the illusion breaks, truth becomes visible. Ladies and gentlemen, never be afraid of truth simply because it hurts. Truth hurts once. Illusion hurts repeatedly. Truth may force you to cry for a season, but illusion can keep you waiting for years. And there comes a moment when you must decide whether you would rather experience the pain of acceptance or the exhaustion of false hope. This is why someone sometimes comes back only after you stop waiting. Because your waiting allowed them to remain comfortable. Your availability protected them from the consequences of their behavior. Your constant attention reassured them that they had not really lost you. But when you stop waiting, the psychological reality changes. Now there is uncertainty. Now there is absence. Now there is consequence. Now they have to confront the possibility that the door may actually be closed. And uncertainty can force the mind to revisit what it previously ignored. The person who once thought, she will always be there, now wonders, what if she isn't? The person who once thought, I can come back whenever I want, now wonders, what if I waited too long? The person who once assumed your love was guaranteed may suddenly recognize that your love was a gift, not an entitlement. And that realization can be powerful. But I want you to understand something very carefully. You should never withdraw your love as a strategy to manipulate someone's mind. Do not disappear because you want them to panic. Do not become silent because you want them to chase you. Do not post your happiness because you want them to become jealous. Do not pretend you are over them simply to create a reaction. Because if you are doing all of these things for their reaction, you are still emotionally attached to them. Your behavior is still being controlled by them. Real letting go is different. Real letting go says, I am no longer going to organize my life around whether you notice me. That is freedom. You are not trying to punish them. You are not trying to teach them a lesson. You are not trying to make them regret anything. You are simply refusing to continue participating in a relationship that requires you to abandon yourself. That is the difference between manipulation and self-respect. Manipulation says, how can I make you feel my absence? Self-respect says, I am no longer going to remain where my presence is not respected. Manipulation says, I hope you see me happy. Self-respect says, I want to actually become happy. Manipulation says, I want you to come back. Self-respect says, if you ever come back, your behavior must be different. This distinction can completely change your life. Because when you stop trying to control another person's emotional response, you regain control over your own. And that is where your healing begins. There is something psychologically powerful about absence. When someone is constantly available, the mind can become accustomed to them. Their presence becomes part of the background. You may not consciously appreciate what they provide because you expect it to continue. The message every morning, the phone call at night, the person who asks how your day went, the person who remembers the small details, the person who knows your fears, the person who understands your silence, the person who was there during ordinary moments. When that presence disappears, the mind begins noticing the empty spaces, the empty chair, the silent phone, the missing conversation, the unanswered question, the routine that no longer exists, and memory begins to work. The mind reconstructs. It remembers things that were taken for granted. This is why absence can sometimes create recognition. But recognition is not the same as transformation, and this distinction is essential. A person may recognize that they lost something valuable, but have they become capable of caring for it? That is the question. Someone may say, "I miss you," but can they say, "I understand why I hurt you"? Someone may say, "I want you back," but can they say, "I have changed the behavior that destroyed our relationship"? Someone may say, "I cannot live without you," but can they say, "I am willing to build something healthy with you"? These are very different statements. The first expresses emotion, the second expresses responsibility, and mature love requires responsibility. If someone returns only because they miss the comfort you provided, then the old cycle is waiting for you. They return. You forgive. Everything feels beautiful for a few weeks. Then the same patterns appear, the same emotional distance, the same inconsistency, the same disrespect, the same excuses. And once again, you are hurt. This is why you must never be more excited about someone's return than you are interested in the evidence of their transformation. Words are easy. Nostalgia is easy. Apologies are easy. Promises are easy. Change is difficult. Consistency is difficult. Accountability is difficult. Emotional maturity is difficult. So if someone returns, do not ask only, "Do they still love me?" Ask, "Can they love me in a healthier way?" That question will protect your heart, because love alone is not enough. Two people can love each other deeply and still destroy each other. Two people can have chemistry and still be incompatible. Two people can miss each other and still be unhealthy together. Two people can share history and still have no future. Therefore, the goal is not simply reunion. The goal is alignment. The goal is emotional maturity. The goal is mutual respect. The goal is reciprocity. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to restart something that has not actually changed. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a profound psychological phenomenon that occurs when a person finally stops chasing. The person being chased loses the certainty of control. As long as you are chasing, they know where you are. They know you care. They know you are waiting. They know the emotional door remains open. But when you stop, they no longer know. And uncertainty creates reflection. But again, this is not a reason to play games. It is simply a consequence of reality. When you stop chasing someone, you are no longer giving them constant access to your emotional energy. And when that energy disappears, they may notice. They may begin asking themselves questions. Why isn't she contacting me? Why did she stop? Did she finally move on? Was I wrong? Did I lose her? And perhaps the deepest question, why did I think she would always stay? That question can be uncomfortable, because it forces someone to confront entitlement. Sometimes we don't recognize the value of something because we believe it belongs to us. We treat someone's kindness like an obligation. We treat their forgiveness like a guarantee. We treat their patience like an unlimited resource. But nobody owes you endless access to their heart. Love is not a contract that says you may hurt me as many times as you want and I will always remain. No. Love requires boundaries, and when someone crosses those boundaries repeatedly, walking away is not cruelty, it is information. You are telling them, this is where I stop. And sometimes that boundary is the first moment they truly understand that you are a separate human being, not a resource, not a possession, not a permanent emotional safety net. A person with limits, a person with dignity, a person with dreams, a person with a life beyond them. This is why a strong boundary can sometimes produce more psychological impact than 1,000 explanations. You can explain your pain for hours, but if nothing changes, the explanation becomes noise. A boundary makes the message clear. I will not continue this. And then you follow through. That is what gives the boundary meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, if someone hurts you and you continue begging them to stop, they may hear your words. But if someone hurts you and you calmly remove yourself, reality speaks for you. You do not need to scream. You do not need revenge. You do not need to expose them. You do not need to convince everyone that you were right. You simply walk away. And walking away can be one of the most powerful psychological acts because it demonstrates that your self-respect has become stronger than your fear of loss. That is when something changes inside you. Before, you were afraid. What if I lose them? After healing, you begin asking, what will I lose if I stay? That is a completely different question. The first question comes from fear. The second comes from self-awareness. And perhaps this is one of the greatest transformations a person can experience. You stop fearing the loss of someone more than you fear the loss of yourself. You begin to understand that loneliness is temporary, but self-betrayal can become a habit. You begin to understand that missing someone is painful. But living in a relationship where you constantly question your worth is also painful. You begin to understand that leaving can break your heart, but staying in the wrong place can break your spirit. And eventually, you choose the pain that leads to freedom. This is not weakness, this is courage. Courage does not mean that you feel nothing. Courage means that you feel everything and still make the right decision. You can cry while walking away. You can miss them while walking away. You can love them while walking away. You can hope they change while walking away, but you still walk, because you understand that your life cannot be placed on hold, waiting for another person's development. And here we arrive at one of the deepest lessons. Sometimes someone comes back because your absence forces them to meet the part of themselves they avoided while they were with you. Perhaps they took you for granted. Perhaps they were emotionally immature. Perhaps they believed they could have you without earning your trust. Perhaps they used distance to protect themselves from vulnerability. Perhaps they were afraid of intimacy. Perhaps they were carrying wounds they had never confronted. Perhaps they did love you, but did not know how to love you properly. And sometimes your departure becomes the mirror. When you leave, they are no longer distracted by the relationship. They are left with their choices. They have to confront what they did. They have to confront the possibility that their own behavior caused the loss, and that can create regret. But regret is only the beginning. Regret says, I wish I had done things differently. Growth says, I understand why I did what I did, and I am changing the pattern. Those are not the same. A person who truly changes does not merely apologize for the outcome. They examine the pattern that created the outcome. They ask, why did I behave that way? Why did I become distant? Why did I sabotage intimacy? Why did I take them for granted? Why did I become defensive? Why did I refuse vulnerability? Why did I hurt someone I claimed to love? These are difficult questions, and psychological growth requires difficult questions. You cannot change a pattern you refuse to examine. You cannot heal a wound you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot build a healthy relationship while protecting the unhealthy parts of yourself from being confronted. This is why someone coming back should never be the final goal. The final goal should be consciousness, awareness, maturity, Integration, the ability to see yourself honestly. And this is where the deeper psychological lesson becomes important. Sometimes the person who hurt you is not simply a villain. They may be a wounded human being. That does not excuse what they did. Understanding is not permission. Compassion is not surrender. You can understand someone's trauma and still refuse to become the place where they repeatedly act it out. You can recognize their fear and still maintain your boundary. You can forgive them and still choose distance. You can understand them and still protect yourself. This is emotional maturity. It is possible to hold two truths at once. They hurt me, and they may have been hurting themselves. I loved them, and they were not healthy for me. I forgive them, and I will not return to the same pattern. I hope they grow, and I will not wait for them. This is what freedom sounds like. You no longer need hatred to walk away. You no longer need revenge to feel powerful. You no longer need them to suffer so you can heal. Your healing becomes independent of their punishment, and that is a beautiful place to arrive, because revenge keeps you psychologically connected. Hatred keeps you connected. Obsession keeps you connected. Even constant hope can keep you connected. But acceptance releases you. Acceptance says, this happened. I did not deserve everything that happened. I learned from it. I am allowed to grieve it. And now I choose my future. That is closure. Not getting the perfect explanation. Not receiving the perfect apology. Not seeing them regret everything. Closure is accepting that your life must continue even if some questions remain unanswered. Ladies and gentlemen, you do not need another person to explain your worth. Your worth existed before they arrived. Your worth existed while they were there, and your worth remains after they leave. Someone's inability to recognize your value does not erase it. A diamond does not become a stone because someone cannot recognize it. A person can reject something precious. That does not make the precious thing worthless. So if someone hurt you, do not spend years trying to prove that you were worth loving. Instead, ask yourself why you allowed their opinion to become the judge of your value. That question leads to freedom, and perhaps this is the most important lesson of all. The reason someone comes back may be that they finally recognize your value, but your reason for moving forward must be that you recognize it too. That is the difference. If you only heal because you hope they return, you have not truly healed. If you become confident because you want them to notice, you have not truly become confident. If you become successful because you want to make them regret leaving, they still control you. If you become beautiful because you want them to see what they lost, they still occupy your mind. But if you become successful because you love your potential, if you become healthy because you respect your body, if you become confident because you have discovered your worth, if you become peaceful because you are tired of living in emotional chaos, then you are free. And ironically, that freedom may be the very thing that makes someone recognize what they lost. But by then, you may no longer need their recognition. That is the paradox. The moment you stop needing someone to come back is often the moment you become capable of receiving their return without losing yourself. Because if they come back, you can evaluate, you can observe, you can listen, you can ask questions, you can look for consistency, you can decide. You no longer react from desperation. You respond from consciousness. You do not say, "Thank God, they came back." You say, "Let me see who has returned." That is wisdom. You do not give immediate access simply because someone finally understands your absence. You require evidence. Because your heart is not a revolving door. People cannot enter and leave whenever they want. There must be accountability, there must be respect, there must be transformation, there must be a new foundation. Otherwise, You are not beginning again. You are repeating. And repetition is not reconciliation. It is simply the same lesson wearing a different outfit. So if they come back, ask, what has changed? Not, how much do they miss me? Ask, what have they learned? Not, are they afraid to lose me? Ask, are they capable of treating me differently? Not, do they still love me? Ask, can their love create safety? These questions will protect you, because love without safety becomes anxiety. Love without respect becomes humiliation. Love without reciprocity becomes exhaustion. Love without accountability becomes a cycle. But love, combined with maturity, can become something beautiful. And that is what you deserve. Not merely someone who cannot live without you. Someone who knows how to live beside you. There is a difference. Someone who needs you may cling to you. Someone who values you will respect you. Someone who fears losing you may control you. Someone who loves you will trust you. Someone who is lonely may return. Someone who has grown will rebuild. Learn to recognize the difference. Ladies and gentlemen, there is another side to this story. Sometimes the person will not come back, and you must be prepared for that possibility, because if your healing depends on their return, then you are still giving them control. Maybe they never contact you. Maybe they never apologize. Maybe they never understand. Maybe they move on. Maybe they tell themselves a different story. Maybe they never recognize what they lost. And as painful as that may be, your life must still continue. You cannot force another person's consciousness. You cannot force someone to recognize what they did. You cannot force someone to love you correctly. But you can choose how you respond. You can say, I wish they had been different, but I will not allow their inability to become my permanent wound. That is strength. Your healing does not require their participation. Your future does not require their approval. Your happiness does not require their regret. Your closure does not require their apology. And your worth does not require their return. Remember that. Because there is a dangerous fantasy that keeps people trapped. If they come back, it will prove that I mattered. No, you mattered before they returned. You mattered while they were hurting you. You matter if they come back. And you matter if they never do. Your value is not determined by someone's ability to recognize it. This is where you reclaim your identity. You stop being the person who was abandoned. You become the person who survived. You stop being the person who was rejected. You become the person who chose herself. You stop being the person who was hurt. You become the person who healed. You stop being the person waiting for an apology. You become the person building a future. That is the transformation. And when you transform, the old version of you begins to disappear. The version that tolerated everything. The version that over-explained. The version that begged. The version that waited. The version that constantly questioned herself. The version that believed she needed someone else to feel complete. She begins to die. And something stronger emerges. A person who knows her boundaries. A person who understands her emotions. A person who can walk away. A person who can forgive. A person who can love. A person who can stand alone. A person who knows that being alone is better than being repeatedly disrespected. This does not make you cold. It makes you conscious. You do not need to build walls around your heart. You need to build a door, and you decide who is allowed to enter. That is emotional maturity. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps someone is listening to this right now and secretly hoping a particular person comes back. Maybe you wake up every morning checking your phone. Maybe you are waiting for one message. Maybe you replay the last conversation. Maybe you wonder whether they regret what they did. Maybe you imagine them suddenly appearing at your door. Maybe you hope they will say, "I finally understand." And I want you to hear this clearly. It is okay to hope, but do not build your life around hope. Live. If they return, you will deal with that reality when it arrives. But today belongs to you. Today is not waiting day. Today is not checking day. Today is not analyzing day. Today is not begging day. Today is your day. Go outside, move your body, work on your goals. Call someone who loves you. Read something that expands your mind. Create something. Learn something. Pray. Reflect. Rest. Build. Heal. Because the more you live, the smaller the wound becomes. Not because the wound was meaningless, but because your life becomes larger than it. And one day you will realize that you have gone an entire morning without thinking about them. Then an entire day. Then a week. Then you will hear their name and feel something, but it will not destroy you. You will remember, but you will not collapse, and that is healing. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is remembering without surrendering your present. You can honor what happened without allowing it to own you. And perhaps one day, if they return, you will look at them differently. Not through the eyes of the person who once desperately wanted them, but through the eyes of someone who has grown. You will see them clearly. You will see their strengths, their weaknesses, their wounds, their potential, their patterns. And you will no longer confuse potential with reality. You will no longer fall in love with who they might become. You will observe who they are. And then you will decide. That is freedom. You no longer need the relationship to validate your identity. You can choose it because it genuinely adds to your life. And if it does not, you can leave. That is the real power. Not making someone come back. Being able to choose whether you want them when they do. So, if they return, do not rush. Listen, observe, ask, watch, let their behavior speak. If they have truly changed, you will not have to manufacture evidence. It will appear in consistency. It will appear in accountability. It will appear in patience. It will appear in respect. It will appear in how they handle conflict. It will appear in whether they can hear your pain without becoming defensive. It will appear in whether they take responsibility without blaming you. It will appear in whether they understand that trust must be rebuilt. Because trust is not restored by one emotional conversation. Trust is restored through repeated evidence. Day after day, choice after choice, action after action. That is how someone proves they have changed. And if they have not changed, you must have the courage to walk away again. Do not let nostalgia convince you that the old relationship was healthy. Sometimes we miss the good moments and forget the reason we left. Remember the whole story, not just the beautiful chapter. Remember what it cost you. Remember what you learned. Remember why you had to choose yourself. Because memory has a tendency to romanticize what distance has softened. You must be honest. Was the relationship peaceful? Was it reciprocal? Were you respected? Were you heard? Were you emotionally safe? Could you be yourself? Could you express your needs? Could you trust their word? If the answer was consistently no, then missing them does not mean you should return. It simply means you are human. You can miss something that was not good for you. That is one of the hardest truths to accept. You can crave what harmed you. You can love someone who is wrong for you. You can remember beautiful moments inside a relationship that ultimately needed to end. And that does not make you foolish. It makes you human. But consciousness means you do not allow every feeling to become an instruction. You can feel the desire to call and still not call. You can feel loneliness and still not return. You can feel nostalgia and still remember reality. This is emotional discipline, and emotional discipline is freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, if someone comes back after hurting you, perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: their return is information. It is not an obligation. You do not owe them access because they finally regret what they did. You do not owe them forgiveness on their schedule. You do not owe them another chance. You may give one if you genuinely believe it is right. But it must be your choice. And if you choose not to, that does not make you bitter. It means you learned. Sometimes forgiveness means releasing anger. It does not always mean reopening the door. You can forgive someone from a distance. You can wish them well without inviting them back into your life. You can let go of resentment without restoring access. This is another form of maturity. And perhaps this is where the deepest lesson lies. The person who hurt you may have been part of your story, but they do not have to become the author of your future. You are still writing. Your story is not finished. This chapter may have been painful, but it is not the whole book. There are people you have not met, places you have not seen, dreams you have not pursued, versions of yourself you have not discovered. There are mornings ahead where you will wake up grateful that you did not give up. There are relationships ahead where you will not have to beg for basic respect. There are friendships ahead where you will feel safe. There are opportunities ahead that will require the energy you are currently spending on someone who hurt you. So reclaim that energy. Bring it home. Bring your attention home. Bring your heart home. Bring your mind home. You have spent enough time standing outside someone else's emotional door. Come home to yourself. And if one day they return, let them find you there. Not waiting, not begging, not angry, not trying to prove anything, just standing firmly inside your own life. Then you can decide, not from fear, not from loneliness, not from nostalgia, but from wisdom. And if they do not return, you will still be okay. More than okay. You will grow. You will discover that you were capable of surviving what you once thought would destroy you. You will understand that the heartbreak did not end your story. It revealed your strength. And perhaps that is why the deepest reason someone comes back is not simply because they miss you. It is because your absence gives them the opportunity to confront a truth they avoided while you were present. They finally see the cost. They finally understand the pattern. They finally recognize the value. They finally experience the consequences. But whether they return or not, your task remains the same. Become conscious. Become whole. Become free. Because the greatest victory is not hearing, "I made a mistake." The greatest victory is being able to hear it without needing it. The greatest victory is not seeing them regret losing you. The greatest victory is realizing that you no longer need their regret to validate your worth. The greatest victory is not getting them back. It is getting yourself back. So let them go. Let the silence be silent. Let the distance be distance. Do not chase. Do not manipulate, do not perform, do not wait, live. And if they return, let their actions speak. If they do not, let your life speak. Either way, move forward. Because you were not placed on this earth to spend your entire existence waiting for someone to realize your value. You are here to live, to grow, to love, to learn, to become. And sometimes the person who hurt you becomes the unexpected teacher who shows you the boundaries you never knew you needed. Sometimes the relationship that broke your heart becomes the experience that teaches you how to protect it. Sometimes the person who walked away becomes the reason you finally walk toward yourself. And perhaps that is the deeper meaning. You thought you were losing them, but life was asking you to stop losing yourself. You thought you were waiting for them to return, but life was waiting for you to return to yourself. You thought the question was, will they come back? But perhaps the real question was, will I come back to myself? And when you do, everything changes. Your standards change, your boundaries change, your friendships change, your relationships change, your choices change, your identity changes, and eventually the person who once had the power to destroy your entire day becomes a memory. Not because you stopped caring, because you started caring about yourself too. That is the lesson. That is the transformation. That is the freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this the next time someone walks away from you. Do not chase their shadow. Do not spend your life knocking on a door that someone has chosen to close. Step back. Breathe. Look at your life. And ask yourself, what would happen if I stopped waiting? What would happen if I chose myself? What would happen if I trusted that my future could be bigger than this pain? The answer is simple. You would begin living again. And perhaps somewhere along that journey, the person who hurt you will look back. Perhaps they will realize. Perhaps they will regret. Perhaps they will return. But by then, something inside you will have changed. You will no longer be asking, do they want me? You will be asking, do I want this? You will no longer be asking, will they choose me? You will be asking, are they capable of meeting me where I am? You will no longer be asking, do they miss me? You will be asking, do their actions demonstrate growth? And that is when you know you have healed. Because the person who once controlled your emotions now has to meet your standards. The person who once had unlimited access now has to earn trust. The person who once walked away now has to face the consequences of walking away. And you are no longer standing still. You are moving. You are becoming. You are returning to yourself. So if someone comes back after hurting you, do not immediately celebrate their return. Study the reason, study the behavior, study the change, and study yourself. Ask whether the person standing before you is someone you can safely build with. Ask whether you have become someone who can say no. Ask whether you have healed enough to see clearly. And if the answer is yes, then perhaps a new chapter is possible. But if the answer is no, keep walking. Because not every return is a second chance. Some returns are simply another test. A test of whether you have learned the lesson. A test of whether you will choose yourself again. A test of whether nostalgia can overpower wisdom. Do not fail yourself because someone finally knocked on the door. You are allowed to answer. You are also allowed not to. That is your freedom. And remember, the person who hurt you may someday understand your value, but you must understand it first. They may someday regret losing you, but you must stop regretting choosing yourself. They may someday miss your presence, but you must become comfortable with your own. They may someday return, but you must never return to the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. That version of you is finished. Let her rest. She did the best she could with what she knew. Now you know more. Now you see more clearly. Now you understand. Now you choose differently. And that is what growth looks like. Not becoming someone who never gets hurt. Becoming someone who refuses to stay where they are repeatedly hurt. Not becoming someone who never loves. Becoming someone who loves without abandoning themselves. Not becoming someone who never needs another person. Becoming someone who knows they can survive without one. That is emotional freedom. And when you reach that place, something extraordinary happens. You no longer need someone to come back. You simply need the courage to keep moving forward. And perhaps that is the only reason someone should ever be allowed to come back into your life. Not because you cannot live without them, but because they have finally become capable of contributing to the life you have built without them. That is the difference between dependence and love, between fear and freedom, between attachment and consciousness, between repeating the past and creating a future. So stand tall, release the expectation. Stop checking the door. Stop counting the days. Stop wondering when the message will come. Stop giving your peace to someone who is not even present. Take your attention back. Take your life back. Take your power back. And if they return, let them find a person who has changed. A person who knows their worth. A person who knows their boundaries. A person who has learned from pain. A person who does not confuse suffering with love. A person who does not confuse attention with commitment. A person who does not confuse nostalgia with compatibility. A person who understands that love should not require self-destruction. And if they never return, let your life become the proof that you did not need them to complete your story. Because you were never incomplete. You were simply distracted from your own wholeness. Now you are awake. Now you are conscious. Now you are free. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the greatest thing someone can do after hurting you is leave, because their departure can force you to discover what their presence prevented you from seeing. Your strength, your boundaries, your identity, your courage, your worth. And sometimes the greatest thing you can do after being hurt is not wait for them to return. It is return to yourself. That is where your life begins again. That is where your peace begins again. That is where your confidence begins again. That is where your future begins again. And perhaps one day they will look back and understand exactly what they lost. But when that day comes, may you be so deeply rooted in yourself that their realization is no longer necessary. May you be able to say, I loved you. I learned from you. I forgave what I could. I released what I had to. And now I choose myself. That is not bitterness. That is not revenge. That is not pride. That is consciousness. And when you become conscious, you stop asking people to give you what you can finally learn to give yourself. Peace, respect, validation, security, worth, and love. The deepest love you will ever experience begins with the relationship you build with your own soul. So if they come back, let them come back to the new you. And if they do not, keep becoming, because the destination was never their return. The destination was you. And perhaps the person you have been waiting for all this time was never them. It was you. The version of you who finally stopped chasing. The version of you who finally stopped begging. The version of you who finally stopped waiting. The version of you who finally understood. I do not need someone to return in order to know that I was worth staying for. And once you know that, you are free. You are finally free. And no one who walks away from you can ever take that freedom again.